now
on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
Well, great news, everybody. You can trespass on the U.S. Capitol in a horde of hundreds, if not nearly 1,000. You can disrupt congressional proceedings. You can deface the Capitol with vandalism. And you're just a protester again. They'll just call you a protester again. No more. But apparently that's only, Patrice Onwuka, it's only if you're aligned with, let me check my notes here. Who are they aligned with? Oh, yes,
Hamas.
An international terror organization that just slaughtered hundreds, if not thousands, of innocent people, raped women, and kidnapped them, decapitated children. If that's who you're protesting on behalf of, then everything's fine.
Apparently.
Those are our new rules. I think we might have a thing or two to say about it this morning. Also, it's 6:05 in the middle of our election in Virginia. Bart Marcois over at American Greatness has seen some troubling actions with regard to ballots in Fairfax County, and he's going to tell us what he witnessed. Also at 6:35, Harry Eichelberger is running for Loudoun County Treasurer. 8:05, Matt Foldy, our friend Matt Foldy, journalist and bon vivant. He was there at the Capitol Office building. And let's get a congressman or woman by the time the show is over. Let's try to wrangle
We'll
someone
try
in.
our best.
Yeah, we'll do that. Well, they're busy. There's a lot going on. They got to figure out who the speaker is going to be, so we might do that.
It's been, 3 weeks almost now?
Good Thursday to you, Patrice.
No, it is not Thursday, Larry. It is just Thursday.
Every
And
day
hello,
with you
folks.
is a yay.
Oh, that's sweet.
All right, let's get to it. Cannon Office Building was intruded yesterday. And it's all started with a, as most violent insurrections go, Patrice, someone had to incite the mob. And in this case, it was pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian terrorist Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib.
Continue to watch people think it's okay to bomb a hospital.
Who bombed a hospital? She just...
Not Israel.
Not Israel, no. In fact, I don't think anybody
terrorists on the
bombed a
ground.
hospital, based on the evidence I've seen and based on most of the reports. An errant rocket shot by a terror group in Gaza that was aimed at innocent Israelis went astray and hit the parking lot of a hospital.
Exactly, yeah.
That's what I've seen. In fact, I've seen shots of the hospital in question, and there's some broken
And the
windows.
hospital is, exactly.
But it's certainly standing up. Sadly,
But
Rashida...
facts don't matter, Larry.
No.
Facts don't matter.
Rashida
Emotion does.
Tlaib reads the Washington Post too much. So here she is with the big lie, riling up this mob out in front of the Capitol by claiming that Israel, supported by the U.S., just bombed a hospital, and she's pretend crying while she does this too. These crocodile tears.
We're children. You know what's so hard sometimes is watching those videos and the people telling the kids don't cry. And let them cry. And they're shaking, and somebody, this, they keep telling them not to cry in Arabic. They can cry, I can cry, we all can cry. If we're not crying, something is wrong. And so I'm telling you right now, President Biden, not all America's with you on this one. And you need to wake up and understand that. We are literally watching people commit genocide and killing a vast majority.
Genocide. She's accusing, again, another big lie. And by the way, this was all happening while the President of the United States, her president, the leader of her party, was still overseas conducting U.S. foreign policy. And she's basically, she continued, let me finish, because she finishes with a threat. But again, that's two big lies. Number one, that there's genocide. And you know what? When you lie about genocide in connection with the Jewish people and the people of Israel, that's kind of doubly heinous, because I think Jewish people have a pretty firm understanding and a bit of a sensitive position on the idea of genocide. Yeah, they know genocide, okay?
Exactly.
Don't freaking throw genocide out there as a big lie to rile up your crowd. And then the other big lie, that the hospital was bombed by Israel.
Just like this, and we still stand by and say nothing. We will remember this, but all of you need to know, I swear to God, Wahyat Allah, you are on the right side of history. You are. You're doing everything possible to save lives. What is wrong with that?
Okay, and after that, the mob that she was screaming at then took to the streets, stormed into the Cannon building, occupied it, and disrupted congressional proceedings, and they trespassed. So I ask you, Patrice Onwuka, that speech from Rashida Tlaib, how is that anything but incitement to riot? How is that anything but incitement of the crowd to go and break the law? And especially when you compare it to President Trump's speech on January 6th, where he literally said, now we're going to go march down to the Capitol peacefully and patriotically, and we're going to have our voices heard, which is very different than what this person just said.
Well, obviously the most glaring difference is the D next to her name and the R next to President Trump's name. Secondly, that she is a woman and a woman of color, which means that she gets out on the victimization level chart. She is actually prioritized above everybody else. So that means that her voice and her whatever she says carries weight and lacks accountability. Yeah. So that's number 2. And then number 3, this is what the left does. Everything they claim you do is exactly what they're doing. And so she's absolutely riling up the crowd, which frankly, if you listen to the people, there are only a handful of people who are actually responding to her call every time she said something. It was just a handful of folks. But the larger point here is that we have in public office one of the leading top positions in our nation, someone who is anti-Israel, who is anti-Semitic, and frankly, who does not love America either, and anti-American, and exploiting her position to advance the agenda of murderous terrorists across the country, across the world, and frankly, the sleeper cells in this country. Yeah. So. I know that some folks will not call it an insurrection because windows weren't broken and law enforcement didn't end up passing away afterwards. But the point is, there has to be respect across the board for for peaceful protest and not for people breaking into public spaces. And this is not just here in the Capitol. This is in capitals across the country where leftists love to break into capitals and hold sit-ins or whatever they want to call it, and it's never considered anything but a peaceful protest. Yeah, well said. And no law enforcement died as a result of the events of January 6th, but that didn't stop that big lie from being perpetrated as well. This again, I would normally have called something like this a protest too, except for what happened on January 6th when we had to use words like insurrection, sedition, revolution. It's funny though, no one has been actually arrested or charged. They've arrested over 1,000 people.
Haven't. I'm talking about January 6th. They arrested 1,000 people on January 6th, but none of them were charged with insurrection. But that doesn't stop the flapping heads in the media calling it an insurrection. It was a protest, just like this is a protest. We did have some arrests yesterday. We did. But I don't know. They weren't charged with anything serious. You'll remember we did have people from January 6th were charged with obstructing an official proceeding. Right, obstructing a congressional proceeding. Well, in a moment, you'll hear clearly yesterday's events obstructed a congressional proceeding, a Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing. I'll let you hear that audio in a moment, and we're waiting for those arrests. We're waiting for those convictions, by the way, and we'll see if Merrick Garland stays true to his word that there are not two sets of rules in this country. First, though, it's 5:15 WMAL traffic and weather. Every time.
Weeknights with Mark Levin, 6 to 9 p.m.
On News Talk 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.
Yeah, to be clear, I haven't gotten details on actual arrests. There were 50 to 100 of these protesters insurrectionists who had been detained and were sitting with zip-tied hands. Whether they were actually booked, well, it says some headlines say nearly 300 arrested.
Yeah, I'm seeing hundreds of
in Cannon office, but I'd like to see the actual, because they say arrested sometimes, and what that really means is detained and then let loose.
And then okay.
So let's see the arrest records. Let's see the actual docket. Let's see the actual sit in jail for over a year without a hearing, like we saw with the January 6th protesters.
I do see here CBS News is saying 3 people were charged with assaulting police officers. So out of the hundreds arrested, 3 were actually charged with something sounding relatively serious.
So Marjorie Taylor Greene, Congresswoman from Georgia, she's something else. And I
MTG, she's grown on me. I was, but she's actually stepped up.
Well, she made her way through the crowd yesterday and started taking pictures of the protesters, insurrectionists. But also she focused in on their phones because they were using WhatsApp to communicate with each other. Remember when certain social media companies suspended people and actually demonetized the social media apps because they were used to coordinate communications on January 6th?
Yes.
I guess that's what Facebook needs to do with WhatsApp because they were all using WhatsApp to talk to each other. And the name of the group, you can name a group chat when you're talking to people.
Yeah, like moms that love soccer.
There you go.
I'm on some group chats like that.
Right.
Yes.
We have a little group chat amongst our team here on O'Connor and Company, and I label it O'Connor and Company pals, right?
Insurrectionists?
Yeah. Well, no, this group chat on WhatsApp was called Global Intifada. Oh, that's nice.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
You're talking about killing people. That's I obviously want to belong to that group chat.
Global Intifada, and because a bunch of people said these are pro-Palestinian Jewish protesters was the way it was labeled by a lot of people yesterday in the media. The Jewish part of it is a group called Jewish Voice for Peace. All right. The Anti-Defamation League says that Jewish Voices for Peace calls for economic, cultural, and academic boycott of the state of Israel and rejects the view that the Israeli-Palestine conflict is a tragic dispute over land, which has been perpetuated by a cycle of violence, fear, and distrust on both sides, in favor of a belief that the Israeli policies and actions are motivated by deeply rooted Jewish racial chauvinism and religious supremism. So, in other words, Jewish Voices for Peace is pretty Jewish Voices for Peace is pretty anti-Jewish.
Yeah, it's pretty much just taking the name to make them sound friendly, so they can get more dollars from people who actually do support Israel. It's interesting that they would name themselves in Intifada because that is speaking specifically about using violent protest. And so, why in the world are we allowing people who are organizing around the idea of violent protests to run willy-nilly through our capital and, frankly, on a lot of college campuses?
Great question.
With the same mantra.
Great question. I doubt we'll get an answer to it. By the way, let's ask the same things that were done after January 6th. Let anyone who is affiliated with this, their homes should be raided at 3 a.m. by the FBI. With a huge police presence on the block to shame them publicly. Even if there's no formal charges made, their homes should still be raided. They all had T-shirts and posters that had been pre-printed.
So well-organized, printed.
Where'd those come from?
Well-funded.
Where'd the money come from? Who paid? They came in on buses. Where'd the money come from the buses? Let's get a full investigation of that. Merrick Garland told us under oath last month that there are not two sets of rules in this country. You break the law, it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat, it doesn't matter whether you're conservative or liberal. If you break the law, you will be dealt with in the exact same way. Let's deal with these people in the exact same way then. That's the only, let's hold the Attorney General to his word.
Well, and, this Biden administration under Merrick Garland, haven't they said that the biggest threat in our nation is white supremacists?
That's what they have said, yes.
I.e. J6
That's right.
protesters?
The greatest threat in our nation is domestic terror groups affiliated with the right. That's what they said.
And by extension, parents speaking out at school boards. I mean, that's the sad part, because God forbid, and that is truly my prayer, that this does not happen, but God forbid that a sleeper cell does wake up and start enacting some of these violent attacks here in the United States, then I would love to see what the Attorney General has to say then. I would love to see what the Biden administration has to say then, because they have been asleep at the wheel and their eyes have been on, frankly, the wrong targets.
Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene also captured the names of some of the people who were part of this group chat, because she took pictures of their phones as they were chatting. One of them, it appears to be, and I'm looking at some research that was done on this individual, appears to be a lawyer for the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is also, again, another level of organization here. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene has asked the United States Capitol Police to preserve all the video surveillance footage, all the photographic evidence, all the police reports, all the arrest records from the events of October 18th. She's hoping to have a full investigation for the Committee of House Administration to investigate the entire thing, and she's taking it very seriously. And strangely, though, the mainstream media didn't take it very seriously. There weren't many mentions of this insurrection yesterday. It's weird.
There weren't mentions of the vandalism of the Capitol buildings. They're literally spray painting or writing "Free Palestine" on government property. I mean, come on. But listen, we shouldn't be surprised. We saw this with the BLM protests, Larry. Those were also peaceful protests while, you see burning cars in the background and federal buildings damaged. And frankly, the private buildings, D.C. downtown was a ghost. It looked like, Mad Max during the BLM protests in 2020. Yeah. But those are peaceful protests, according to the news media.
Jacob Lew was having a hearing about his nomination as ambassador to Israel yesterday before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
Committee will be in order.
That's a mob, a screaming, hysterical mob that just disrupted an official congressional proceeding. That's against the law. I've seen people sentenced to years in jail because of it, related to January 6th. And by the way, once again, I just want to repeat, all of those people you just heard and saw and what we described in their actions, they were incited. They were all incited by the words of Rashida Tlaib. It is 5:24. Coming up later in the program, we've got Matt Foldy, who was there as a journalist covering the events yesterday. A day that, in my mind, I think is worse than September 11th and Pearl Harbor combined. I'm still literally shaking over it. All right, coming up, State of Alaska suing the Biden administration over oil leases. We'll give you the details next.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station.
Making sense of the news.
News Talk 105.9.
News now
On News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
I just want to issue a quick apology. We did that whole segment about Rashida Tlaib, and we called her a lot of things: pro-terrorist, pro-Hamas, pro-insurrectionist, incitement to riot. I forgot she's also anti-Semitic, and I apologize.
I think I wrote. I think I said
Did you throw it in there?
Point.
Oh, good.
I use it sometime, but yes, we can always reiterate.
Thanks for covering me on that. No, I do, because it's like, we want to be precise here. And when one celebrates the murder of innocent Jews, generally speaking, you're anti-Semitic.
Yes, you are.
Okay,
you are.
Thanks for that. Whew, quick correction. Got to get it out of there. Coming up on this O'Connor and Company at 6:05, Bart Marcois writing about what he's seeing in Fairfax County right now, troubling observations over ballot handling there. At 6:35, Harry Eichelberg running for Loudoun County Treasurer, and at 8:05, Matthew Foldy was Spectator and a few other bylines. He was reporting on the scene there at yesterday's insurrection. We'll get those details from him. I'm Larry O'Connor. That's Patrice Onwuka. And Patrice, earlier this year, with the stroke of a pen, Joe Biden stopped the drilling of domestic oil in Alaska. This is something that had finally been opened up during the Trump administration, which I believe was opened up via legislation. Biden stopped it via executive action, and therein lies what appears to be a lawsuit that has now been filed by the state of Alaska telling the federal government, you can't do this. This is unconstitutional. And let's also point out that by ceasing our domestic oil production in Alaska, it not only makes us more reliant on foreign countries who are hostile to us and our allies, but it also drives up the price of oil globally, which a couple of weeks ago got close to $100 a barrel. It's still hovering up there. Very expensive. And the two countries that benefit most, well, let me rephrase that. Three countries that benefit most by the rising price of oil would be Russia, who needs that money to continue its war against Ukraine, which I thought we're against. It helps Iran, who needs that money to help fund the terror attacks against our allies in Israel. And also, by the way, I keep leaving this out, Americans. Those were terror attacks against Americans, and there are American hostages being held right now, financed by Tehran and the rising oil prices that were instigated by the Biden administration. The third country is Venezuela. So there you go. We're helping all of our most important allies. Do you think this lawsuit will actually be effective, though, and get the job done, or is the best thing we can do is just get a new president?
Well, obviously, option B is best, new president with the right priorities. But in the interim, lawsuits are important, sometimes in just slowing down or halting temporarily these policies from being enacted, whether that's the president deciding, by pen, pretty much that he wants to cancel these oil and gas leases. So if anything, a lot of lawsuits, and you're going to see these lawsuits come out, there's certainly going to be some just in general about whether the federal agencies have the kind of power that they've been enacting to circumvent Congress and legislation and actually pursue whatever the president wants to do through regulatory change. But this one through executive orders. This is really important, and not just from a process standpoint, executive action versus legislative action, but from what it means for me. And the fact that because we are not energy independent, because we are literally destroying our own energy industries in the United States to appease some climate activists, to appease some Democratic leftist voters that President Biden needs to turn out next year, it's wrong. It hits us in the wallet at a time when inflation is still very high. And yes, gas prices have fallen recently. That doesn't mean that they're going to stay low, especially if this Israel-Palestinian conflict persists, and especially if it becomes a regional conflict where other countries are drawn into this and the United States gets drawn into this. Expect gas prices on the oil markets and the energy markets to absolutely go right back through the roof. Yeah. So we need to be dependent not on Venezuela, not on the whims of tyrannical leaders. We need to be ensuring that we ourselves are protecting our own energy needs.
We need to be independent rather than dependent on those hostile nations. And again, you have one hostile nation who has disrupted the price of oil, or if you have one country like ours who has arguably the highest demand for petroleum products, deciding that we will be so entirely dependent on foreign sources instead of exploiting the internal domestic sources that we have here in the country, then you're raising the price across the board, across the world. It helps countries like that. By the way, and again, another thing that drives me crazy about this, we are supposedly not drilling for oil here in America because we're trying to affect some change in the Earth's temperature, right? This is all about carbon emissions and climate change. Well, it's not like the oil's not getting drilled elsewhere.
That's right.
The drilling of oil, has nothing to do with climate change. The so-called theory behind climate change is that it's carbon emissions from the burning of petroleum products. Well, the burning is still going on, man. It's just other countries' fuel that's being burnt. Yeah. So as long as we're still burning it, why not burn our own? All right. The other country that I mentioned is Venezuela. And, well, thanks to the Biden administration, great news for the dictator of Venezuela. We are now easing oil, gas, and gold sanctions against Venezuela, according to the Treasury Department, right after President Nicolas Maduro has agreed to have an election. Of course, Maduro lost the last election they had.
And he's still in power.
And he stayed in power. So it's like, Maduro's like, okay, let me get this straight. I just have to agree to an election. I don't have to step down. I don't have to honor the results of the election. All we got to do is have an election. Okay, everybody, we're having an election. Okay. Are you happy now? Janet Yellen's like, we are satisfied. Yes, thank you.
That's good. Send us the oil.
Yeah, now we'll buy your oil and we'll make you richer and more prosperous so you can buy off more people to stay in power.
And
they're such amateurs.
I mean, listen, the Biden administration wants the United States to be last in every single category, to go from a leader in energy production to be last in energy production. I mean, it's just kind of sad. And then to prop up these tyrannical leaders who, I listen, my husband's from Nigeria, and it's comical when you hear that when there's election time, they literally go house to house handing out boxes of cash to people for their votes. This is what happens in these types of banana republics.
Yeah.
But this is what the U.S. government wants to support.
That's
banana
right.
republics, just so that they can they could cover their behinds with high gas prices and getting oil, just so that they can put out these policies that appease these climate nutcases. I'm sorry, Larry. I'm usually
Don't be
not a
sorry.
name caller, but today I'm just calling.
It's good. We like that, Patrice. By the way, Nigeria beat Mozambique in soccer the other day. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh,
I'm
really?
sure it's a
No,
big
we
deal
usually
there.
follow British soccer, so I have to go.
You're so pro-colonialist. A spokesperson for a terrorist organization, the PLO, works for the Homeland Security Department here in the United States of America. Thanks to Luke Rosiak at Daily Wire for uncovering this story. Nejwa Ali was part of the PLO's delegation to the United States. In 2017, Trump expelled the PLO's delegation from D.C. Its spokeswoman, Nejwa Ali, was left unemployed, so Trump's Department of Homeland Security hired her.
Yeah.
And her job was to become a U.S. official vetting immigrants. Right. So if there were asylum seekers coming from the Middle East, it was this person's job to vet them, to make sure that they weren't terrorists. And she literally just worked for a terrorist organization.
Well, certainly she would do nothing below board. I mean, obviously, she would ensure that there would be,
Yeah.
the right kind of asylees would be allowed in.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Am I too naive?
I think so. Again, I want to reiterate, this was President Trump's Department of Homeland Security who hired her. What kind of vetting was done, I don't know, but her social media footprint is pretty obvious. She made posts that included statements like F Israel and any Jew that supports Israel.
It's crazy.
Are you ready for your downfall? She was asked by Luke, she just posted on social media a picture celebrating the paragliders who came in and slaughtered the innocents at that music festival. This whole image of paragliders carrying machine guns has become this iconic representation of...
It's a new rallying image for pro-Hamas.
And it literally means slaughter. It stands
It
for the
does.
slaughter of innocent Jews.
It does.
When asked if she still supported the paragliders, she said, and I quote, "I abso-effing-lutely celebrate them, a-hole, F you." Well, that's nice for a spokesperson for the PLO and a employee of the Department of Homeland Security. By the way, she has now been placed on administrative leave from her
But she
job.
still has her security clearance.
Yes.
Isn't that the case?
I believe so. And again, I want to reiterate, her job was to vet asylum seekers. It was her job to say, oh, yeah, this person poses no threat to the country. Should we maybe do an audit on her actions at this point? Maybe uncover
Absolutely.
this. Is there an inspector general over there at Homeland Security that might want to pull on this thread?
Every single
immediately?
case. Well, they need to go back through and look at every single case she's green lighted or denied. And then, frankly, it's a reminder. It's a big picture point, Larry, that we can have a change of leadership at the very top, and we can even have changes of leadership at the top of these agencies. But there's still people in the middle and middle tiers of management who are hiring nutcases like her. Did I use nutcases?
Nutcases, anti-Semitic nutcases, and this is why people refer to it as the deep state, because presidents come and go, and these people are ingrained into our government,
and
making
they're
decisions.
Unelected, so they don't respond. There's no accountability for them.
Another one too. We told you about this network of pro-Iranian, pro-Mullah influencers that were financed and started up by the foreign ministry. They actually found their way into the Biden administration via Robert Malley, who is also a pro-terrorist dignitary who was placed in charge of Iranian policy on behalf of the Biden administration. Well, Adam Credo, we just had him on the show. He reports on this from the Free Beacon, says that a member of that secret Iranian government influence operation is going to keep her job and her top security access at the Department of Defense. DOD has said that even if she has ties to that Iranian propaganda network, it's not disqualifying for her to keep her job. What would be disqualifying? Wearing a MAGA hat?
At this point, I probably only misgendering someone else.
Yeah.
if you work at HHS.
There you
That
go.
is, I think, at this point, I really do believe that is the only thing that will get you fired as a federal employee, to misgender someone.
Senator Joni Ernst said in the article, the Biden administration is compromised. They continue to shamelessly defend allowing an Iranian spy to infiltrate and work at the Pentagon, likely allowing the regime access to highly sensitive information. There's more to come on that story as it develops. And I know you're not hearing it elsewhere, so that's why we'll keep telling you these stories about people within our government. One hired by the Biden administration, and yes, one hired by the Trump administration, who clearly have ties to terrorist organizations. This needs to be dealt with sooner rather than later. It's 5:54.
After a big dinner, my nighttime heartburn would keep me up. I'd be taking antacid after antacid all night long. But then I tried Prilosec OTC. Just one pill a day blocks my frequent heartburn for a full 24 hours, giving me one-and-done heartburn relief. Without heartburn keeping me up, I could have a restful night's sleep.
Prilosec OTC. One pill a day, 24 hours, zero heartburn. It's possible while taking Prilosec OTC. Use as directed for 14 days to treat frequent heartburn, not for immediate relief.
Sometimes I struggle to get to sleep. My body stopped for the day, but my mind is still running. So I take ZQuil.
ZQuil, the world's #1 sleep aid brand, has a range of non-habit-forming products to fit you and your family's needs. Invest in a great night's sleep for the best you tomorrow.
I'm awake and ready to take on anything.
Better days start with ZQuil nights. Explore our products at ZQuil.com. Use as directed. Keep out of reach of children.
5:55, now WMAL traffic and weather every 10 minutes, first on the 5s. Here's Steve Herschel.